You're listening to BioTalk with Rich Bendis, the only podcast focused on the BioHealth Capital Region. Each episode, we'll talk to leaders in the industry to break down the biggest topics happening today in biohealth.
Hi, this is Rich Bendis, and I'm your host for BioTalk. And as we work our way through these chilly winter days, hopefully we're on the downside. And I see some warming temperatures, but I also see some snow following. But yet we have a great guest today on BioTalk. And he comes from the southern part of the BioHealth Capital Region in Newport News, which is a nice place to be. And we have Ron Kurz, who's the Senior Director and General Manager, Business Development and Medical Business for Canon Virginia. Long title, but Ron is going to tell us all about everything engaged in that title as we talk to him over the next half hour to 45 minutes. So Ron, welcome to BioTalk.
Rich, thank you very much. Great to talk to you.
Yeah, and the other thing I'm going to mention is Ron is our newest board member at BioHealth Innovation and going to help strengthen our southern ecosystem within the BioHealth Capital Region. So Ron, congratulations and thank you very much for joining the BioHealth Innovation Board. We're looking forward to working with you.
Yeah, it's something I'm very, very excited about, hopefully bringing Virginia in a little bit more and getting a little bit of strength in our Commonwealth.
Well, thank you. We think that you're going to be a great addition. But before we go into learning a lot more about Canon Virginia, we'd like to know more about Ron Kurz. So if you don't mind, would you give us sort of your own introduction of yourself to the listeners so that we understand sort of your background and how you evolved to where you are today?
I am a mechanical engineer by degree. So I started as a thermal and vibration analysis person at GE Aircraft Controls in Binghamton, New York. So I've primarily focused on military and commercial aircraft. Did that for about 6 years. And then obviously, as you brought up, Rich, a little cold up there. So we decided to move south and started working for a company called Enview, making video projectors. So strengthened my mechanical packaging experience, high-speed digital imaging. That was my strength. And then during that time, Canon was in the area and they had started a design group up in Newport News, Virginia. And that was something fairly new. And I applied and joined Canon, it's 23 plus years ago. So I started as a design engineer, moved up through the business group. And then I started the R&D group at Canon Virginia, the business development engineering group, the medical products group. And now my current role is overseeing essentially business development, primarily in the medical field.
And that role for business development covers what geographic area, Ron?
Primarily, we're focused in North America.
Okay.
Right. So, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in the Canon group, but our function is primarily the North American market.
And we'll talk a little bit about your title. So that general manager role comes into the Canon medical side of the business for North America, correct?
So we are the contract manufacturer, right, for Canon. So that's different than Canon Medical Systems. So we have many different companies. So Canon Medical Systems USA is headquartered in California. So we are primarily Canon Virginia, which is just a manufacturing arm, wholly owned subsidiary for Canon USA in the Americas. So our responsibility is to support Canon manufacturing opportunities and technology growth in the Americas.
Well, since you have multiple roles and you started to explain them, this is a good segue to get into that a little more deeply. So let's get into sort of your primary roles as the Senior Director, General Manager, Business Development and Medical Systems for Canon Virginia, and sort of the interaction you have with other divisions within Canon. And maybe also talk a little bit about, before you get into that, the history of Canon and how they really got into the medical systems business.
Yeah, so that's probably the best start, is to give you an overview of Canon, because everybody has that perception of Canon. It's a well-known brand, right? We're a camera copier company. But essentially, we started back in the 30s with Mr. Mitterai. And Mr. Mitterai was a obstetrician by profession. So I guess you could say, medical's in our DNA, right? That's how we started, right? But we went down the camera path, right? And today, we have about $30 billion in sales, 182,000 people across the globe. And we're broken up into 5 main regions, right? We have the Americas, we have Europe, we have Asia, Ocean, and we have Japan. So that's kind of how we're broken up by segments. So Canon Inc. will develop technology or a product, and then we'll roll it out. Each of the regions then is responsible for any customization uniqueness in that area. So for the US, that's our role. So we're the sole manufacturing arm for Canon. So my responsibility is kind of to be that bridge, right? So we are looking for ways to bring some technology and know-how to medical companies, right? The way we do things now within the Canon Group is the technology is developed for internal use. And probably a great segue here is that we just received our notification of patents awarded. So for the 36th consecutive year, Canon is in the top 5 US patents granted. And I don't think people realize that because they think of us as a product company, but we're really a technology company. And in that, the last 16 years, we're number 1 amongst Japanese companies.
Wow. Yeah, that's quite a competition over there.
Right. So you start thinking about the big names, the Apples, the Googles, et cetera, right? Canon is up there in number of patents consistently. So what I like to do now is kind of look at understanding what technology we have out there, and not so much just for Canon products, but how can we parlay that into the medical field? And this is kind of what I've put a lot of my time in since recently, 2017. In 2017, we got ISO 13485 certification as a contract manufacturer. So we had been doing work internal to the Canon Group, but at that point we decided, hey, we have some know-how, we have some technology. Let's open this up to, unique opportunities and kind of grow our medical portfolio.
And before you go into some of those capabilities, a lot of the listeners probably don't know anything about ISO. Talk about the importance of what that means.
So that ISO 13485 is critical for us, right? I mean, that is, everybody had ISO 9000, right? But ISO 13485, it's the certification standard that the FDA requires, right? So in order to be an FDA registered site, you have to have all your quality systems in play, be audited. And not only are we audited to 1345, but actually we are one of the few manufacturing companies that just got our MDSAP. Right. So now, multi-device single audit program. So we can now, which is fairly unique because usually it's the OEM that gets that, not the manufacturer. But now this will help us help companies get into other countries a little streamlined. So we're able to use a little bit of our size and prowess to kind of, muscle in a little bit and say, look, this is the value proposition of the Canon Group. Come talk to us because we have technology, we have our know-how, and we're ready to help you bring your product to market.
Well, thanks for that clarification. Now you can continue on with your explanation.
Right. So now that we have our ISO, 13485 registration, right, we're out looking for potential partners, right? We don't want to just be a CM. A CM is important, but in our case, we believe we bring more value.
And a CM is a contract manufacturer, right?
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
Right, okay.
I apologize. Yep. Sorry.
Okay.
Yep.
You have your own lingo, and I'm going to ask you about that lingo as we go through.
We do. Manufacturing people do have a lingo, right?
Everybody,
yeah, right. Everybody says they can build something, right? But it is different, right? It depends on what you're building and how you're building it, scale. And that's something that Canon as a Japanese company brings to the forefront. I think our manufacturing know-how is what we call it. It's our IP, for lack of a better word. And what that comes from, Rich, is within the Canon Group, all of our product around the globe is only manufactured in a Canon facility. So we don't use third-party contract manufacturers. And while that's very unique, it allows us to share information seamlessly, right? We've learned things. We have very unique skills on how to do stuff. Now, knowing that, I can parlay that with my new outside companies. So if you come do business with us, you're kind of getting that knowledge, right? You're getting that intrinsic knowledge that I could pull from Europe, I could pull from Asia, I could pull from another factory. If I say, well, that's similar to this kind of a product, and I know that's being made here, we can quickly find out, what are the pitfalls and streamline success.
So basically, this contract manufacturing, what portion of the business is it for what you manufacture for Canon specifically versus what you do for other people? And I guess I'll dive a little deeper. Does that mean if I have sort of a medical device imaging technology in Baltimore, Maryland, and I understand the technology, but I don't have one to manufacture that for me, that company in Baltimore could come to you and you potentially could be the manufacturer of that proprietary technology for them.
The short answer is absolutely. The caveat is obviously non-competitive, right? So with the acquisition of Toshiba Medical, so in 2016, we acquired Toshiba Medical, right? So that added a significant pillar to our cornerstone. So prior to that, we had business units were the copier segment, the imaging segment, the industrial, which is like semiconductor. Those were our business segments, right? The fourth pillar was medical systems. When the acquisition happened, the sales were so large, significantly large enough to make a business unit, right? So now we have a medical systems business unit. So we have to just be careful, with all of our patents and things. We just don't want to do anything if it's a competitive arena. But once we understand it's not competitive, we're also willing to help companies if they have imaging needs. We're big on microfluidics, in vitro diagnostics. We handle inkjet printing, right? That carries over very nicely in vitro diagnostics and handling very small amounts of fluid and how to move them. So we are finding some partners there to work with. And again, with our CMOS sensors, fluorescence, PCR, there's a lot of skills I think that we can bring to the table that people really would never consider Canon previously. And this is a great forum for me to at least try to share some of that info quickly to say, hey, we're in the area, and what we want to do is we want to see this area grow. Just much like BioHealth, when I met you, this is a great vision. And I think, it would just help us and help the area if we can show people, how much power is in this centralized region.
And since you're in business development and looking for potential new clients, what's the profile of the ideal new customer for you?
So the new customer actually needs some value-added services from us, right? So we do everything from making injection mold tools to molding to assembly to high-end inspection. We have full automation engineering on staff for high volumes, right through reverse logistics. So anything from cradle to grave, asset management. What we want is not just to build your product, but to bring you some technology, some competitive advantage through automation, something that's valuable to you that we can bring to the table that a typical CM can't. And one of the things that we can also bring is within the power of Canon. So within the United States, we can offer up to a company, let's say, we'll use your example, a Baltimore company that has a product to build. If they come to us, we can offer up to them potentially call center support right here in Virginia, in Chesapeake. We can offer Canon Financial Services to help fund some big deals or getting them into hospitals to help mitigate cash flow potential issues. We have Canon Solutions America for service and support. We're talking greater than 1,500 boots on the ground service techs that are already readily deployed that you can take advantage of, right? So you don't need to build that infrastructure. So, I hate to use that word one-stop shop, but when you come to Canon, it's really that possibility of somebody could build it and do all of those pieces for you and just kind of help you get your product moving along.
That's very interesting. You could basically have a technology company that's strong in IP, but don't know anything else about the business. And you basically could do all the back office and field work for them.
Yes, right. So they don't have to develop that infrastructure. There's no reason to. That's not their strength. Yep.
And then what stage of company would be too early for you? I'm talking about if you have startups and they have a concept, they need to get some prototyping done and things like that. Do you get involved at the very earliest stage working with companies, or do they have to already be into the marketplace and need someone to accelerate their manufacturing?
That's a tough one, right? It's kind of a gray area. It really depends on, maybe what market they're in. If we look at it and see, how emerging it is, how early we want to get into it. We'll do some prototyping, right? We have prototyping capability to some extent, right, at our facility prior to injection molding, so we can do that. But a lot of times what I'll do is introduce them to some design firms, maybe to help put a little more substance on their concept to make sure it's manufacturable. You and I both know it's a big difference when an R&D person can make 5 or 10 on a bench and bring it to manufacturing, right? It's a leapfrog. And a lot of times companies don't realize the cost and effort to do that, but we like to get in early, if possible, to help them with design for manufacturing, to try to give them some insight on ways to reduce that cost before it's locked into the design and then it's too late.
Thanks for that insight, but I'm sure we're going to tell people later how they can get in touch with Ron Kurz, who's the Senior Director, General Manager of Business Development and Medical Systems for Canon Virginia, so that you can potentially identify some potential new clients. But let's talk a little bit more about Virginia now, Ron. You mentioned that the Canon Medical headquarters is in California, but the manufacturing is in Virginia. Now, how did Virginia get to become the manufacturing center for Canon in America?
So back in 1985, actually. So when Canon started operations in the US, they were West Coast based. They were looking for an East Coast location, and they were looking for an area where there was significant infrastructure already available. And they settled on Newport News because we have major interstates, I-95, I-64. We have 3 airports, typically within about an hour. And then we have Port Norfolk, which is big for us, right? Moving a lot of cargo in and out. So they settled on Newport News, and it's been a great relationship with the city since. And the Commonwealth has been very receptive to us and worked very well with us on any of our needs, and has been a big help.
Talk a little bit about the size of the entity down there in Newport News and number of employees and facilities. I mean, people might not understand the scope of how large you are there.
Yeah, we're sitting on about 165 acres, about 1.7, 1.8 million square feet under roof, and probably right now we're at around 1,200 people. The important part of that is when I say we're a manufacturing company, of those members, I think right around a couple hundred are engineering. So really the way we classify ourselves now within the Canon Group is a regional technical headquarters, right? Because we have engineering know-how, right? We can develop automation. We have a product development group. We have a business development engineering group, right? We have ways to nurture technology at our location. So we're not just a manufacturer anymore. So we are the manufacturer for Canon, but with the engineering know-how, we bring a little bit more to the table, when customers come to look for some help.
And you mentioned the Americas as a region. Now, does your services all cover companies in Mexico and Canada?
Yes, we've done business with both. Yes.
Okay, so that's really the whole North America scope there, basically, for your region. Great. And you've been there 23 years now, you say, with Canon. Right?
Yes.
So how big was Canon Virginia when you got involved?
Well, at that time, we were big on printer manufacturing, laser beam printers. I was awe-inspired because it was the first time I had walked into a factory and seen just large-scale automation printers coming down assembly lines nonstop. And then probably in the early 2000s, the crunch hit, right? The dollar amount. It got down to a $40 price point. And Canon as a company made a decision to move all manufacturing back to the low-cost regions. And we had to reinvent ourselves, right? And that's when Canon Virginia took a significant step forward to kind of reinvent, who are we? How are we going to support the region in a different way? We're not going to be able to be a mass producing printer manufacturer in the United States. It's just not price competitive. So we just kind of came up with new ways of injection mold making, contract manufacturing, reverse logistics, services and support for Canon USA. So we've kind of just reinvented ourselves.
Yeah, and you mentioned that Newport News has been great to work with, but how has been Newport News as well as the state in supporting all of the growth that you experienced over the last 20 years?
Oh, they've been absolutely great. We have relationships with Virginia Bio, right? With the state and local officials. Actually, the Newport News officials will be in this week. We constantly have a very close dialogue with them. So, they have been a huge help for us as we break new grounds and we have new needs. They're right there by our side to help us with whatever we need to try to get that process done sooner than later. So they've been very receptive.
Yeah, we have a great relationship with John Newby, but what's very interesting, it's one of the Virginia Bio board members. It's also a board member of BHI that introduced you and I, and that's Donna Edmonds from Brainbox. Talk about your relationship with Donna.
So I met Donna through a current project company that we're working with, and then I didn't realize at that time Donna was involved with them on another project. So it's kind of a little three-way triangle, but it's kind of nice to see this close-knit group. And as we start to talk amongst ourselves, you start to realize, how we're all intertwined. And I believe it's great that we're all like, Donna's up in Richmond, we're just, an hour down the road, and, we met you, and, this power I'm seeing people bring to this area. We still have the growth in Charlottesville. There's a lot of work going on in Blacksburg and the Roanoke area. I'm trying to get my footprint out there a little bit more, understanding we're on the eastern part of the state. We want the other part of the state to understand, hey, Canon's here. We're here to help you if you need help. So this is just another great platform to try to, see how we can get people to understand our region and how our region should be a major player in the medical field.
Now that you're stepping out a little bit more to explore other areas of Virginia, and hopefully we can help introduce you to other areas within the BioHealth Capital Region, Talk a little bit about the evolution of the Virginia biohealth or medical ecosystem since you've been engaged with Canon down in Newport News. What are the changes you're seeing occurring within the state of Virginia since they formed Virginia Bio and trying to be a little more proactive?
Well, obviously a lot more startups, right? A lot more startups spinning out from the universities, right? So they're obviously looking for help, some a little farther along than others, depending on which university they come out of. But obviously everything now from a manufacturing standpoint, it's getting smaller, right? And more difficult to manufacture, right? The designers are pushing envelopes that the manufacturers are trying to stay in stride with, right? And I believe that is going to continue the trend, right? Smaller, faster, cheaper, and it just really pushes current technology and forces innovation. I mean, it's forced innovation on our side. And like I said, the microfluidic side, as an example, we've created instrumentation in Japan where we could cut steel tooling now down on the order of 50 micron channels, no problem. So we can mold microfluidic channels in a macro part easy and measure it repeatedly. So it's pushed envelopes, but it's by doing that, we've created equipment to actually meet that need. So I see that as an example of going forward. I'm going to see more and more of that.
When you talk about spinouts coming out of universities, do you try to maintain some type of contact with the tech transfer offices at the universities?
We do a little bit, not as much, to be honest with you. Again, back to your point, it's not really a strength of ours to work with the startups as much. What we'd like them to do is when they engage us, to try to find a partner and kind of get them moving a little bit farther along and then kind of join back in at a little later time.
Great. Okay. Maybe that's something that BioHealth Innovation can help work with you a little bit because, we do get a lot of the startups, but the key is the term we use is commercially relevant. They've got to be beyond the proof of concept stage. And there has to be a market that we know who the competition is. It has to be scalable. They know that someone's going to pay for it from a reimbursement standpoint or private pay or whatever. And, that it has a potential to actually do something in the marketplace. So that's sort of the criteria BHI uses in determining which kind of companies that we can best serve, because we can't be all things to all people. So if we can identify companies that may have some of your needs, and I think one of the things that would be beneficial is that if we could help promote the services and capabilities of Canon in Newport News, we might be able to identify some of those that are sort of growth-oriented companies rather than just pure startups, which might fit your profile a little better.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. Yes, welcome that.
Super. So the question becomes now then, you've been focused in getting outside of Newport News and seeing other parts of Virginia. How can we help you explore other parts of the BioHealth Capital Region? Because, unfortunately, we have artificial barriers in this region. We have state lines, we have rivers, we have bridges, we have, state assemblies and capitals, and people compete with one another. But, we sort of see those as invisible. And I would imagine you don't care either. You don't care where the potential customer is for Canon that you can service, regardless of what geographical region you're in. So what can we do to help you grow and expand your services and the knowledge of what you do within the BioHealth Capital Region?
I think it's just the networking. I'll be honest with you. I'm going to be very candid. You helped me on a problem last week, right? I reached out to you. I sent you an email, said I was looking for a unique lab. And honestly, I was quite surprised, Rich. It was really my first engagement with you professionally. And literally within a handful of minutes, I was getting emails with potential labs that could help solve our problem. That was infinitely valuable to me in this project, right? I was able to reach back out to the NIH and my customer and say, look, here's some potentials to solve this problem. So I think, that put a great feeling about how we could possibly work together, right? Because I really believe that networking, right? I could show you what I think we can bring from a manufacturing and as a company, but I think you have all the knowledge of who's in the area, what people are doing, SBIR grants, who's touching what, that I think maybe as we just start to communicate a little bit, we can find these great partnerships and fits.
Well, I'm glad that worked, because it's really not me, because what I do is push a button. I put a few names in an email and a text. I go out to my talented team of entrepreneurs and residents, and my team that basically has, if you look at the 1 degree of separation, we're sort of 1 degree from about anything, just because of the knowledge that my team has. So it's amazing how they came back with different perspectives too. One came with the NIH and the other came with the commercial side. And hopefully somewhere in the middle, it'll land and benefit your client. But I think that's the key. It's not Rich Bendis. It's really the BioHealth Innovation team, our board of directors, and all of the people that are our partners that we have in this region. And I guess that's the real benefit. We view ourselves as an innovation intermediary. And as an intermediary, that means we don't have to control everything. We just have to find a way that we can advance the knowledge or the connection that someone needs to help them progress their company or their technology or their science within this region. So I'm glad the litmus test worked on this first one. I can't guarantee that we're going to get a 30-minute response on every one of your requests, but that's a good start.
That was great. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. So let's talk a little bit about some of your future goals for Canon Virginia. And, you can talk about it personally as well as corporately for what you'd like to accomplish over the next 3 to 5 years there.
So obviously, corporate-wise, we want to bring innovative technologies and ideas, right, that make an impact to emerging markets. We have a fundamental philosophy called Kyosei that is, essentially means working together for the common good, right? Harmoniously, just making everything better, right? All working for that common goal. In medical, that is what we see as a major growth area, right? So we are, by getting that ISO 13485, by setting our company up, our manufacturing company, myself inclusive on the business dev side, we are putting resources on the medical side because we believe that that's where the value proposition is. There's a significant value proposition for everyone to go down this path. So, and then personally, I just, we're all touched on medical, right? We've all had somebody or known somebody or been in a hospital and seen how hard people work and seen the technology, in our case, the Canon side modalities, the imaging modalities. It's very satisfying to see something that your company's touched or you've helped a company. So, in the next 4 or 5 years, I can't wait to just bring on more business, especially into Virginia, as well as letting companies see that it's not just Massachusetts, Minnesota, and California, right? That this region is a strong region, for companies to consider.
Yeah, that's great perspective. And basically, you mentioned 3, Massachusetts, Minnesota, and California. Minnesota really never comes into the equation because it's not one of the top biohealth clusters of the country, but it's one of the top medical device clusters in the United States, which is more aligned with what you guys are manufacturing down in Newport News, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
So is there something that I haven't asked you or that you would like to relay to the BioTalk listeners that you'd like to discuss that we haven't discussed yet?
No, I think it's been a great forum. I think you've kind of allowed me to kind of give an overview of the Canon Group and then specifically what Canon Virginia's role is within that.
Well, I think you've done an excellent job in explaining that. And we're going to post this, of course, on the BioHealth newsletter, which we'll do once we release this podcast. But at the same time, if you have some other information and maybe a short article you could do on Canon Virginia, we'd actually be glad to post that as well. And if you have some of your specifications of services that you can provide, that would be also beneficial to the listeners because, out of sight is out of mind. And if you look at geographically, people get comfortable in their own backyards. You're in our backyard, but you're not that far away. But it took me 11 years to connect with you.
Right.
That took a long time. And it was only because of Donna that suggested it. So I guess the key is we can expand and build upon that in the future by getting you introduced to more people and what your capabilities are in the region. So we'll be glad to do that.
Sounds great. Thank you very much.
So this has been super. Our new board member for BioHealth Innovation, Ron Kurz, who's also the Senior Director, General Manager, Business Development and Medical Business for Canon Virginia. And, this has been very enlightening. We've learned a lot about Canon, its global history, how it evolved and grew in Newport News, how it's committed to stay in that region and grow, and how it can become a greater part of the BioHealth Capital Region. And I believe with your leadership, Ron, I think you're going to be extremely successful, and we look forward to working with you.
Yes, and we look forward to working with you. Very excited. Thank you very much, Rich.
Thanks for listening to BioTalk with Rich Bendis.